We're live! Yay! Sorry I'm a little late. I'll be honest, I was sometimes I will read Amazon reviews on certain supplements and things when I'm doing research on, different compounds and stuff, and I just like to read people's like firsthand experiences with things. And so I was doing research on turpentine for parasites, and I was just reading the uh, the Amazon reviews, and it's just like bizarre. And I'm like reading all these people's parasite stories, I just get sucked in, sucked in. But, while I'm waiting for all you guys to join, so good to see you guys. Katrina, Kayla, Kristen. I love seeing your guys' faces. Stephanie. I know that Trudy, thank you guys for being here and taking your time. I hope you guys are hanging in there. Just as a disclaimer, remember, none of the stuff we talk about today is medical advice. It's just for education and inspiration. I expect you to do your own research, to make sure you're applying it to your specific situation. You know what medications you're on. You know what your situation is. And so I just want you guys to be careful and know that what we talk about today is not, treatment or anything like that. That being said, let's dive in. When you say fruit juices, what brands do you look for or ingredients? Fruit juices should be pure fruit. So I'm always looking for organic, and I'm always looking for nothing added. So that's pretty much it. I usually get the glass bottled juices like you could find at a health food store. White grape, cranberry, things like that. But mostly I'm talking about orange juice. So oranges are gonna yield some really good juice. Berries don't yield very good juice, so I prefer to put those in a smoothie. But orange juice is gonna probably be the most superior juice. And then apple juice is my second favorite, and then white grape juice. I like real grape juice, like purple grape juice, but it is very rich in resveratrol, and so it can cause some problems for some people if they're drinking a lot of it. But watermelon juice is also good when watermelon's in season. I'm trying to think of what else. Coconut water is obviously really good. It's not quite juice, but yeah, you're just looking for pure juice that is has no preservatives in it. Took Jiro's formula zinc balance, and a month later my cystic acne of 8 years is gone. You think the zinc copper blended helped mobilize fortified iron? It's totally possible. You could have had a zinc deficiency, straight up. Copper could have been an issue because the zinc balance does have 15 milligrams of zinc and 1 milligram of copper. So, definitely you could have just needed the zinc. But that's amazing. That is really amazing. Do you know anything about Desbio homeopathic stuff? I don't know about that brand specifically. I know a lot of homeopathic remedies are really awesome. A lot of homeopathic remedies are very useful and very helpful, but I don't know anything about Desbio. Homeopathic remedies are something that I've definitely wanted to dive into. I have I always have research and little research rabbit holes I need to jump into, and I have lists of books that I'm going to read, and sometimes I don't want to take it on quite yet because I know that once I do it's going to be a month-long rabbit hole. But homeopathy is awesome. I don't know enough about it to talk too much about it. Also, would oyster extract supplement be better, more bioavailable alternative to Jiro's formula zinc balance? Possibly. I always prefer to supplement whole foods over supplementing specific nutrients, because a lot of times what will happen is we'll supplement a specific nutrient that we need. Let's use your example, your zinc balance, and you are like, oh my gosh, this is a life-saving supplement. So you take it for months and months and months and months and months, and then now you've thrown your other minerals out of balance because zinc works synergistically with copper and things like that, iron, and other vitamins, so vitamins as well, like B vitamins. So it's kind of one of those things where over time, maybe to supplement a specific nutrient for a set period of time when you need that amount of that nutrient is a really good idea. For example, your body must have needed zinc, and so it ended up working for you, but supplementing that long term might pose other problems. So you would want to supplement it until your body is replenished, and then you would probably want to switch it out with a nutrient dense food that's going to contain zinc. And yeah, oyster oyster extract, oyster supplements tend to be very, very rich in zinc and bioavailable zinc as well. Parasite stories get me every time. I know. Like, I can't stop reading people's parasite stories. I used to, when I was, like, first in the health and wellness community, I was obsessed with this forum called Cure Zone. It's like curezone.org or something. And I'm sure some of you have come across it. But, like, Cure Zone is literally, like, all these hypochondriacs that are, like, super high. They're, like, so afraid of parasites. And they think, like, everything's a parasite. And they just share their crazy parasite stories. Crazy. Any correlation between healing and brain fog getting worse initially? Just had my period and it was so much easier. Thank you. But my brain fog seemed awful. Yeah, I'm so glad your period's getting better. Sometimes you can have some wacky, like what I call detox periods, where when you start to really balance out your hormones or support your metabolism, you start to mobilize things. You start to mobilize estrogen, iron, copper that's not bioavailable, those types of things. And so sometimes the presence of those things can cause brain fog. Another thing to keep in mind is you can totally dump heavy metals as well. When you start to speed up your metabolism and you're starting to heal, your body actually starts to move things that have been sitting there for quite some time, kind of stagnant. And so metals like mercury and arsenic and aluminum definitely cause brain fog. So those are kind of things to keep in mind. But if it doesn't get better or it correlates with your cycle, it could be hormonal. But you kind of always want to pay attention to those symptoms. If it just comes up for a couple of cycles and then improves pretty much overall, then it usually is just a symptom of healing. Is there any risk in a 77-year-old taking 54 milligrams of reactive zinc? Yeah, that's a lot. I'm not going to say like there's a risk, but that's a lot of zinc. If it's just for immune boosting and for a short period of time, I don't see a problem with that. But yeah, I mean, anytime you supplement a lot of a specific mineral, and that's quite a lot, you do run the risk of depleting yourself of other minerals, because minerals really work synergistically with one another. Is broth supposed to taste good? I bought a frozen one and I hate it. Can I do anything to it to make it more appetizing, or that's just how it is? The beef broth is going to taste the worst. Chicken broth's going to probably taste the best, in my opinion. Personally, it's kind of like flavorless or not that great. So what I do is I'll usually do one of two things. I'll add tons of herbs and sea salt to it and a little bit of ghee or grass-fed butter. It just makes it taste better. Or I will roast some vegetables. So I'll roast like things like onions, garlic, potatoes, asparagus, whatever my heart desires. Or like tomatoes, super delish, zucchini, so good. You can sprinkle some Parmesan cheese, do your fancy shiz, and then you're going to roast it until it's really well roasted, and then you're going to throw that in the blender with your bone broth. So just blend it all together until it's smooth, and it makes this very like umami, delicious, thick, creamy soup. So that works really well with like butternut squash. It works really well with all types of vegetables, really, anything your heart desires. And it just kind of breaks up the kind of bland flavor that is bone broth, or in your opinion, disgusting. I personally do not like beef bone broth. I think it tastes disgusting. And so I personally will do the blending of the vegetables with the beef broth. Chicken broth I can semi-handle. What is the best brand for magnesium citrate? I don't really like magnesium citrate, but if you're going to do it, probably Calm. The most absorbable forms of magnesium that are the least hard on the digestive tract or the least toxic are going to be magnesium glycinate or magnesium malate. I really like magnesium bicarbonate, which you guys know, but sometimes it can neutralize the stomach acid. It's hard to get the amount of magnesium that you need just from bicarbonate, but bicarbonate is also a really good form. And then magnesium chloride, which is what you would put on your skin, like a magnesium oil. Yes, just juiced oranges. Yes, there's nothing like fresh squeezed OJ. My DHEAS is low, but I still have acne. Any ideas about this? Yeah, acne is usually going to be driven by estrogen and poor estrogen detox, because even if you have high testosterone, you have enzymes in the skin that aromatize testosterone into estrogen. So it's usually going to be driven by estrogen. A lot of times acne is maybe hormonal, but it's also the fact that hormones are burdening the liver. And then on top of it, things like estrogen really mess up the digestive tract, and so it's usually a liver gut problem. And so supporting the liver, supporting the digestive tract by eating like a raw carrot every single day, and I have a lot of tips in my liver detox guide, which you can get at the link in my bio. Supporting the liver and supporting the gut oftentimes helps with acne tremendously, but usually it's an estrogen issue. Androgens get the blame, but it's usually estrogen. I notice I'm slipping back into some disordered eating habits. I feel the need to not eat or ration my food out of fear. Any tips on how to reframe this mindset? Well, if it's like a fear thing regarding like just not going to have enough food, I can totally understand that. We're in a really unique situation that we've never been in before where, we went to the grocery store a week ago and like everything was wiped out. I don't know about you, but it was terrifying like to see that all our food was wiped out. So it was, that's totally understandable. Personally, I've kind of I kind of experienced that last week a little bit. I was trying to kind of ration food, not eat so much, just because I didn't know what was going to be available. Things like eggs were, being very limited and things like that. So I was just being careful. There's a difference between being careful and, slipping to a I'm not going to eat mentality. But yeah, I think it's just looking at it rationally. Like, do you have access to food? Is food very scarce around where you're living? If it isn't, then you're good, and just focus on that. And if it is, then being careful, instead of not eating, doing one less egg or something like that, rather than just not eating at all. But I totally understand. It's a very unprecedented time. There's weird stuff going on. And so it is important to really, just kind of try to keep yourself in that mindset of everything's going to be okay, like, until it's not, really. Everything's going to be fine until it's not. So just focus on those things. But yeah, it's definitely easy to kind of fall into those patterns. What is your favorite type of cookware and most used cooking equipment tools? Personally, I don't really think that you need a lot of cookware to thrive in the kitchen. I personally am going to use like a small frying pan. So the thing about cookware is pretty much most cookware is going to be toxic in some way, shape, or form. So you're going to do the best you can with what you have. And of course, the best you can with what you can afford. When it comes to cooking eggs, I personally, it's very difficult to cook them in a cast iron. It's very difficult to cook them in an Extrema, which is my favorite brand of cookware. Extrema is a ceramic, a non-toxic ceramic. It's probably the best of the best. The best cookware I could have possibly found is Extrema. They have all types of sizes. I really like them. Very sturdy, very well made. I truly love the Extrema cookware, but eggs stick to them, and I cannot not get them to stick. And regardless, I follow all the directions. I do not want to clean that pan every single time. I can't. So I'm going to use a green pan for my eggs. Is it perfect? No. It's the most non-toxic, non-stick you can get. It's not that expensive. And I'm going to use a green pan for things that I know are going to stick, like pancakes and stuff like that. The Extrema, I have one Extrema skillet and then one big pot for like soups and things like that. And that's probably the majority of the pots that and pans I use. And then when it comes to like tools, that's going to be different for everyone. I like a good Vitamix or some type of high quality blender. I do like my immersion blender for making like dressings and stuff like that. I usually will just throw all the ingredients in a mason jar and then stick my immersion blender in there and it blends it right up. I really like to make my ranch dressing with that. And then I recently got an air fryer about like 3 weeks ago. No, it was longer, like more like a couple months actually, now that I think about it. And I like the air fryer. Now I know it's not perfect. It's definitely non-stick. It's like a basket, so it has like, holes and stuff in it so things can fall through. So it's not like a ton of nonsticks touching your food, but yeah, it's definitely nonstick Teflon. You just don't want to scrape Teflon. You don't want to scrape it up. You want to burn it all off. So I ran the air fryer multiple times until the smell, the nasty smell was gone. And then now I'm just very careful not to scratch the Teflon. Or it's not Teflon, but it's like a non-stick coating. But I like the air fryer. It helps me cook things without using a ton of grease or a ton of oil. And then I use baking sheets a lot. I'm going to roast most of everything. And then like, a crock pot. A lot of people like an Instapot. I personally haven't purchased one yet, not out of like being against them. I just personally am fine with the crock pot because I work from home. But there's some people that are in a rush. They want to cook something very quickly, so they're going to use the Instant Pot. I have it kind of like in the back of my mind to get one. I just haven't gotten one yet. But yeah, I think those are kind of like the things that you need. You don't need a lot in the kitchen. You need basics. Like most of us are going to use 1 to 3 of the same pots and pans every time we cook. And then, we're going to maybe roast things. So we're going to use like some type of pan for the oven. A Dutch oven always comes in handy, especially if you bake bread. But overall, you really need like maybe 10 kitchen essentials to do everything. And that's totally what you need. What's your opinion on a PQQ supplement? Are you talking about like a CoQ10 plus PQQ? I know that's like pretty common or pretty popular. I personally think it's not necessary. There's a lot more basics that we need to be covering before we start like reaching out for these random supplements. So often we're deficient in things like B vitamins, vitamin K, vitamin E. We need to get fat soluble vitamins, vitamin A and vitamin D from the sun or from like high quality dairy. Our nutrition is not covering all our bases, and so we need to first focus on the basics. And like PQQ or CoQ10 or things like that, like they're not as necessary as supplementing vitamin K, for example. So that's kind of my opinion on that. Hey Jess, can't wait to see your podcast interview with Matt. I wanted to ask, does chlorophyll have enough vitamin K to not need to supplement additionally? Definitely not, and it's going to be a different vitamin K than what is going to be in a supplement, but no, it definitely doesn't have enough vitamin K. The vitamin K in greens is usually synthesized in your gut, so our body, greens are going to give us kind of like the prefactor or the cofactor, and our body's going to synthesize it in the gut, and that requires bacteria. So personally, I don't think chlorophyll has enough vitamin K for the purposes that you're looking for. But yeah, chlorophyll, the vitamin K content is kind of shifty in my opinion. It's truly hard to know how much is in there. I agree with Ray on most things, but starch still works far better for me than sugar. Thoughts, possible issues from this? No. I think, a lot of people will take Ray Pete's anti-starch or think that he's anti-starch. He's not anti-starch. He talks very often about glucose deficiency, very commonly, right? He's always talking about glucose. And he well knows that glucose comes mostly, starch is pure glucose. He knows that. He's not stupid. He just talks a lot about things like fruits and dairy in context because a lot of people are struggling with endotoxin and bacterial overload in the gut. And so when they implement tons and tons of starch, they tend to get extreme endotoxin symptoms. And so I think that his anti-starch stance is mostly against what we would call fermentable fibers, things like beans, grains, nuts and seeds. Those are all really bad starches, but he's very pro potato. I think he's pretty pro root vegetable. So it's really, when he says starch, he kind of gives you this like blanket starch statement, but I think he's mostly talking about things like pastas and grains and like that are, grain products, I should say, beans, stuff like that. But I think that women do tend to do well with a good amount of starch in the diet, and Dr. Katharina Dalton talks a lot about that as well in Creation for Progesterone and keeping adrenaline down. Starch works really well, but remember that fruit and starch together is really like this match made in heaven because fruit, fructose, helps the liver and the muscles store up stored glucose as glycogen, which is the king. That's what we want. That's what Ray Peats talks about so often, is we want our liver storing up as much glycogen as possible to keep our blood sugar stable so we don't have to raise stress hormones and break down our tissues, right? That's the whole goal. That's his whole kind of what his whole life's work is about. And so when it comes to starch and sugar, I don't think he's anti-starch and super pro-sugar. I think that's people's translation of his work. There's a big difference, but his anti-starch stance is mostly, I think, because of the gut bacteria issue. And so when he talks about starch, it's always in relationship to endotoxin and gut issues. But I agree that most people need a balance of sugar and starch in the diet, and a variety of both usually works the best. I have a suspicion that collagen is breaking me out, but I love using it to up my protein intake. What can I do to make it so I can tolerate it in my coffee and such? Are you doing a raw carrot salad every single day? And the easiest way you would know is just cut it out for like 3 days and just see how you do. If it doesn't really make a big difference, then it doesn't make a big difference. But if it makes a huge difference, then maybe you're just not breaking it down very well or reacting to it well. But I would make sure you're doing the raw carrot salad every single day. Bone broth can sometimes help with being able to tolerate collagen a little more as well. What are some ideas of things I can eat before bed to avoid low blood sugar crash in the middle of the night? You can do like honey and cheese. You can do, I really like honeycomb and slices on Parmesan cheese. That's really delicious. You can do like a Greek yogurt with honey, or Greek yogurt with like jam, like some type of fruit preserves. You can do cottage cheese and fruit. You can do ricotta cheese and fruit, or like I said, fruit preserves or honey. Usually one of those three things goes really well with any type of like cheese or yogurt. You can do like, sometimes I'll make some brownies. You can make brownies with collagen in them or casein protein in them, and they can be like some protein brownies, and all you have to do is literally use cocoa powder, protein powder, sugar, coconut oil, salt, and a little baking soda. That's literally it. Oh, eggs, like a couple of eggs. But yeah, you can definitely have whatever you want. The goal is just some type of carb and some type of protein. A very common one is going to be like goat's milk with some honey in it, or milk with some honey. That's like my go-to quick one. I brought these over to snack on, but I know they're going to be too loud. These are like my favorite milk chocolate chips. They're like called, I don't know, I don't want to butcher this, Guitard? I know it's French, but I don't know how to say it. But I like these milk chocolate chips, and I'll throw a few of those in a saute pan with milk and some collagen, and I'll just kind of whisk it to make some hot chocolate. It's really delicious. So, really anything that's going to have a little protein, a little carb, and that's going to help your blood sugar stay stable throughout the night. The chlorophyll lemon dark berry juice mix gives me unbelievable bloating and digestive upset, something I should just stay away from. This is pretty common when you have really bad digestive issues, so usually I'll recommend the raw carrot salad first for a couple of weeks, and then lowering the amount of chlorophyll in that drink. So instead of doing like a tablespoon, doing like a teaspoon or a couple of drops or something like that. But yeah, the chlorophyll has a very antibacterial effect, as does the cranberry. So it's actually a very like antibacterial drink. It clears out a lot of bacteria in the digestive tract, in addition to supporting the liver. So it might be that you might have some overgrowth. I'm not saying for sure, but it's pretty common with my clients that have really bad bacterial overgrowth. They get really bad reactions from chlorophyll. I've had quite a few people that have to start with like 1 drop or like a half a drop and work their way up. Can you explain your take on why people get diabetes and how to become more insulin resistant? Polyunsaturated fats. So remember, the implementation of polyunsaturated fats into our diet usually happened around the 1940s and the 1950s. And usually polyunsaturated fat accumulation in the tissues over time is going to increase the amount of free fatty acids in the blood. Stress is going to release these free fatty acids into the bloodstream, and so your cells are going to be burdened with free fatty acids that are from polyunsaturated fats, and it creates a lot of free radicals and oxidation. So it's well known in the scientific literature that poor fats that are not heat stable, cause insulin resistance. So things like canola oil, soybean oil, fish oils, flax oils. Keep in mind, these were considered poisons. They were literally used in oil-based paints till around the 1950s. And then it was kind of like oil-based paints became synthetic, and so it was kind of like, what do we do with these oils that we were producing for oil-based paints? And it was like, oh, let's bleach them, let's deodorize them, and let's put them in the food. Great. And therefore diabetes was born. Any bone broth powder that you recommend that is unflavored? I don't eat beef or chicken. No, because the thing about like any type of bone broth powder is it is going to be more processed. So a lot of them have MSG and things like that, so I personally don't know of any powders. Any powder is going to probably be less superior than actual broth, but I don't know of any powders. Also, do you have thoughts on how we promote regularity without going overboard and getting loose stools? Sometimes just, so constipation is kind of it's a very complex issue for a lot of people. A lot of people are overstressed, they're hypothyroid, they need to evaluate the stressors in their life, things that are possibly causing constipation on a daily basis that they don't know are causing constipation. I've had clients that simply are eating too many nuts and seeds, too many greens, too much fiber, and the minute that they eliminate that, it's less irritating on the digestive tract, because there's usually two different things that are going on with constipation. We have a slow metabolism, so everything's moving through your digestive tract incredibly slowly, and that's usually because stress is high and thyroid hormone's low. Then we've got another causative factor where your intestines are so irritated and so inflamed that a millimeter thick tissue has now inflamed to a 1 inch thick tissue, and now your food has to pass through a tiny little pencil-sized tube that should be this round, but is now this round because the intestinal tissues surrounding it have swelled. And so now the swollen intestinal tissue can't contract properly. Remember, the colon is technically a muscle, and so it's supposed to contract. And so oftentimes it's both of these things. We've got hypothyroidism, so there's incredible amounts of stress in the body. Sometimes it's simply people aren't eating enough. I know with you've been working to eat enough. Sometimes it's way too much, like a lot of over exercises is at play there. Sometimes it's just trauma. There's the pelvic floor imbalances, so people are constantly tight and tense, women especially. If there's any type of sexual trauma in their past, or any type of trauma, like if you do lots of trauma can be as simple as just doing exercises wrong. Like a lot of people who do like Olympic lifting or lots of plyometrics, like box jumps and things like that, have incredible pelvic floor damage just because the jarring movement of slamming down, it's a jarring movement on the pelvic floor pretty much. And oftentimes form is not being practiced properly, and so things like squats are being done wrong. This is very common amongst women. And so we have this incredible pelvic floor imbalance. So the hips are tilted either backwards or forwards, and we have this the actual hips themselves are pushing on the rectum and the colon, and it's affecting the whole muscle and nerve response. It can also be minerals, magnesium deficiencies, potassium deficiency can both cause constipation. So there's quite a bit of things that can affect movement. My favorite thing is getting intestinal inflammation down with aloe vera. I think that if the intestines are constantly inflamed, constantly irritated, aloe vera can promote regularity without causing extremely loose stools. You just have to find a good dose for you. If you do way too much, of course, you're going to get loose stools. If you do too little, it's not going to work. So there's definitely a fine line there. But usually over time, if the constipation is due to intestinal inflammation, what will happen is the aloe vera will relieve some of that pain, soothe it, and things will pass through a lot more, easily. A lot of other people like stuff like Cascara sagrada is a very good kind of intestinal mover, but shouldn't be relied upon long term. And then simply the raw carrot. Raw carrot every single day really does stimulate the bowels. It just has to be done consistently every single day. I took Accutane for 5 months a few years back. I think it wrecked my pancreas. Anything specific I should focus on to recover from that? Sometimes I'll incorporate digestive enzymes. Yeah, digestive enzymes, and then magnesium bicarbonate, or even like a little baking soda, like sodium bicarbonate. The pancreas needs bicarbonate. Pretty much that's what I'm trying to say, is the pancreas needs bicarbonate. Accutane is a synthetic form of vitamin A. So, keeping that in mind, just kind of keeping an eye on your thyroid. That's a big one when it comes to Accutane. I think Accutane toxicity, we can call it that, is really due to people's thyroids being at a different place when they're taking Accutane. So one person might get like extreme horrible side effects from it, wrecks them forever, and another person doesn't get any side effects at all. And I think it's really due to thyroid function. It is not really truly retinol, like any like a usable form of vitamin A, but it is kind of like a byproduct of natural vitamin A. So the goal would be to support the pancreas as much as possible. There are people that say pregnenolone regenerates the pancreatic tissue quite a bit. I personally have no experience with it for that purpose, but that is something to look into. But the easiest way to take burden off the pancreas is to make sure there's some bicarbonate coming in the diet, making sure we're keeping our gut really healthy, and making sure that we are we can take digestive enzymes to take some burden off of it, because a lot of times the pancreas we underestimate the pancreas's role in digestive function. It creates almost all of our digestive enzymes, including ones to break down proteins, to break down lipids or fats, and to break down carbohydrates. Any bone broth powder that is unflavored. I'm a pescatarian and don't like the taste of beef or chicken. Like I said, I don't really use bone broth powders. I don't really know of any that are going to be a good substitute for regular bone broth. Your lives make my week. When it comes to food sensitivities, do you like to cut those things out temporarily while the gut heals, or do you try your best to keep them in and just give your body support? That's a good question. Thank you for coming to my lives. I think it really depends on the person. Obviously, if you're being really triggered by that food, you're getting really bad symptoms. Let's use dairy as an example. I don't know if that's dairy. I think you've said in the past, mentioned something about lactose intolerance, but let's just use dairy as an example. When we have a food sensitivity, we may react to, let's say, Greek yogurt, but then we don't react to cottage cheese. And we may react to sour cream, but then we don't react to Parmesan. So usually there are more superior foods to help you regain sensitivity if you really break it down for your body. It does take some trial and error. So for dairy, for example, a lot of my clients are sensitive to dairy, of course, right? It can be very irritating, especially on an already irritated gut. So what we'll do is we'll try sheep's and goat's dairy first, or A2 milk if you can get your hands on A2. But goats and sheep's is always A2. Usually the A2 is fine. So then we move on to Parmesan cheese. If a really high quality aged Parmesan works well, then you can try to start doing a cow's milk, the cleanest cow's milk you can find, and just do like a sip or two at meals and just see how you do. But you would have to build up over time. Once you can digest milk, like straight up milk, then you usually can digest all the derivatives of milk, like cottage cheese or sour cream or things like that. But personally, like, I don't do well if I overdo it on something like Greek yogurt. Like, I just never do well if I do too much of it. I can do a little bit of it, one serving of it, but I can't do a lot of it. So you kind of just have to find your thresholds. But if something's irritating you over and over again and you just can't figure out how to make it work, cutting it out for a while you do some healing can really, really help. But it really just depends on what it is. Like, I've had people say, like, oh, I really react to nuts and seeds. And I'm like, just get rid of them. Gone. Like, bye. You know, like, you don't need to be eating nuts and seeds anyways. So you're probably just going to do better if you don't eat them for a while and maybe get them sporadically. But if it's like really nutrient-dense foods that you really want to be eating, like something like dairy, then you would want to really work towards being able to digest them. So I hope that helps. Hello, what is estrogen? I don't know what estrogen is. I'm not the all-seeing eye when it comes to supplements. There's like a bajillion supplements on the market. Some people like ask me things like, I think I know everything, and I'm really sorry, but I'm only human and I don't know everything. I wish I did. I truly do. Tell us again the probiotic you recommend, please. I had it written down and now I don't know where I put it. I usually like Just Thrive or Megaspore. They're both very similar probiotic brands. I personally like Just Thrive probiotic a little better, but some people do better on Megaspore, so I like them both. Those are both spore-based probiotics and are going to be my favorite. And then another one that works really, really well is going to be Fluorocist by Life Extension. It is a bacteriophage, so you don't want to take it long term. The goal would be to take it to lower bacterial load in the digestive tract. There's a purpose for it. But Fluorocist by Life Extension also works very well. Do postmenopausal women, sorry, my nose is so itchy. I think it's so rude to like itch your nose, but sometimes I can't stop. Do postmenopausal women have the same hormone goals as premenopause gals, increase progesterone and avoid excess estrogen? Yes. So interestingly enough, there's this big weird push for estrogen replacement therapy after menopause because estrogen production goes down. It's really weird because if you look at the science behind it, that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of caveats to what's going on. It involves the pituitary gland, and it involves the fact that postmenopausal women are going to have very low progesterone production. They have none at all. They're no longer ovulating, and so you need to replace progesterone. And oftentimes, once you get the thyroid function up and progesterone up, you're going to thrive postmenopausally. So yes, very similar. Postmenopausal women might need to take it a little bit more carefully because they have been, depending on how long they've been postmenopausal, I should say, they are going to maybe have lots of estrogen accumulation and very little progesterone for maybe, let's say you've been postmenopausal for a year and a half. You haven't bled in a year and a half, so you have lots of iron overload if you haven't been giving blood regularly. And you have no progesterone and possibly no testosterone, very little, and a lot of estrogen. So the goal would be very similar. You just might have to take it a little more slowly and carefully. A brand of bone broth powder you recommend? I've already answered that question twice. How to get stronger nails. Okay, so things that we can do for stronger nails internally are going to be things like collagen, gelatin, bone broth, high quality proteins, just making sure we're getting enough proteins in our diet. And then oysters, at least once a week, are really awesome because zinc's awesome for your nails. Grass-fed beef liver is awesome for your hair and your skin and your nails. And so nutrients. If your nails are still struggling, there might be some mineral imbalances that you're kind of missing, like maybe calcium or magnesium, and that's why I run an HTMA with all my clients. I really want to make sure that minerals are balanced. Something that I do, and I've kind of learned, because I've kind of flimsier nails, but I've been really working hard. If you see, my nails are kind of bending, but I've been doing okay with them. So what I got was, I'll show you guys, I'll post a picture of it on my stories after this, but it's a nail hardener. It's literally just like vitamin E, some other things in it, and it's an oil that I've been putting on my cuticles and my nails. And then what I'll do is I'll give my nails a day break, and then I've been painting my nails with this like non-toxic polish that's just like kind of sheer, so it's kind of pretty. It's like an iridescent color. It doesn't look like you have anything on, but I've been putting like a couple coats of it on just to keep my nails strong. And then every like week or so, I'll take it off. I'll put that nail hardener on for like a day. I'll put like multiple coats, and then I'll repaint my nails really quickly. And it takes like 5 seconds because it's not like a dark paint, so it's not like you're worried about it looking perfect, but it really has like helped. My nails used to be bendy and now they're kind of like strong. I've been working on it. I go through phases where I like want to grow out my nails and make them really strong, and then like some phases where I'm like, cut them off, I don't give a shit, like I just don't care. What are the benefits of taking methyl B12? Personally, if you have a B12 deficiency, you're gonna, that would possibly be the benefits, but I don't really think you need to take methyl B12 unless you do have a B12 deficiency. But if you're talking about like the methylated form of B12, most people have a hard time methylating their B vitamins, and so if you're gonna take a B12, you wanna make sure it's methylated. But personally, I prefer grass-fed beef liver and B vitamins in the form of like brewer's yeast over methyl B12 supplement. Benefits of raw carrot salad, I heard you mention a lot. I have a whole post dedicated to that if you just scroll back a little bit, but pretty much in a nutshell, it binds to estrogen in the digestive tract and helps kind of reduce the bacterial load, the endotoxin load in the digestive tract. This takes a lot of burden off the liver. It also really helps with hormone balance overall because we want to be making sure our estrogen levels are clearing out of the digestive tract. Once our body detoxifies estrogen and carries it out in the bile, then we want it gone. We want it out of the body. We don't want it accumulating because it's a hormone of growth, and so it's going to stimulate bacterial overload and bacterial growth. And we want it gone. So we want to make sure that estrogen is clearing out of our body. It's hard for me to fully wrap my mind around beans, legumes being so anti-metabolic or negative. They seem like such sacred foods in certain cultures throughout time, along with, of course, animal foods, fruits, etc. Yeah, I think it's just the preparation. A lot of people don't realize that these foods were prepared for days and days and days. They were soaked and then they were stewed and stewed and stewed and stewed. And the people that consumed them were already in pretty good health. Or these foods were the only things available, and so therefore that's why they ate them. And they are sacred in certain cultures, but they've been kind of blown out of proportion. So like, for example, if we look at rice and beans being a South American, Mexican staple, that has been it has definitely gotten more and more popular over time. But we have to keep in mind, it's always about context. And so somebody that's very metabolically healthy and someone that's going to have great digestion, they're going to be able to tolerate legumes probably fine. Like a couple servings of legumes and beans a week is not going to be a problem. But for somebody that has very irritated bowels, legumes, the starches in legumes are very prebiotic, and so they're just feeding bacteria. They are very good at feeding certain microbes. So they're not the greatest form of fiber for people who are struggling metabolically and therefore digestive-wise. But it's going to be different for every single person. Personally, if someone's going to regularly eat beans and legumes, I recommend they invest in an Instant Pot and pressure cook those suckers. Because pressure cooking does reduce the anti-nutrients quite a bit. Soak and pressure cooked. And then, or if you don't have a pressure cooker, cooking them very, very well, like in the form of maybe like a refried bean or something like that, where you're cooking them down, you're boiling them, you're simmering them, they're cooking, and then you're draining the water that they cooked in, and then you're maybe making them easier to digest by mashing them and refrying them. It's not necessarily that these foods are bad, but it's always in the context of health. If somebody is doing very, very well health-wise, I don't bring it up. I don't care if someone eats legumes or beans. But if someone's eating tons and tons of legumes and beans, and let's just use what you said earlier as an example, and they're constipated, then those beans and legumes are not doing them any favors. They're probably being incredibly prebiotic to the bacteria that's driving the constipation. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. I know they are very popular around the world. They're an accessible food. They're an affordable food. And so a lot of times we get foods that are accessible and affordable, mistaken for, because they're so widely available, they therefore must be good for us. And that's not always the case. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, there are, shortages of foods in certain places, and that's very unfair. And so beans and rice become the only thing that's accessible or available for certain people. And so that's what makes up the majority of their diet. And whether they do well health-wise on those things or not is out of their control. If you have a meal every 3 hours and it was recommended to take betaine or hydrochloric acid for low stomach acid with every meal, is that safe? You would only want to take hydrochloric acid with meals that are protein rich. I don't recommend doing hydrochloric acid with meals that are not protein rich because you're going to get the heartburn of death, I like to call it. It's one of those things where I personally take them with larger meals. So a lot of my clients are going to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes they'll do a mid-morning snack, but they're definitely doing a mid-afternoon snack and an evening snack. And so I at least recommend doing hydrochloric acid with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Do I recommend doing it mid-afternoon? Not always, unless they're going to do like some muscle meats or something like that. But you only do it to digest hydrochloric acid, or excuse me, protein. I might have endometriosis. What should I ask my doctor in order to look for it? You should maybe try to get your progesterone tested or your estrogen tested, prolactin tested around 5 to 7 days after ovulation. I don't know, a lot of doctors are not open to doing that, but that's usually a good place to start. Just switch to casein protein from whey. No more bloat or stomach aches. Why is that? Is casein less harsh? Yeah, casein is very anti-stress, anti-cortisol, very easy to digest and absorb. It absorbs slowly, but it absorbs pretty I don't want to use the word routinely, but steadily. Whey, on the other hand, is a precursor, well, it's very rich in L-tryptophan, which is a precursor of serotonin, which is estrogenic. So I don't like whey because it tends to constipate people like crazy. And it's very serotoninogenic, I think that's the word, where it increases serotonin, which a lot of people think is the happiness hormone, which is really just the lethargy hormone. It's like lethargic. If you want to be like lethargic and kind of sad, that's going to be the neurotransmitter serotonin. And it's very estrogenic and inflammatory. So that's why I recommend casein over whey. It just tends to give people less digestive stress overall. And whey is pretty inflammatory. Where's the recipe for the raw carrot salad? Thank you. It's in my post a little bit back, so you'll see shredded carrot, a picture of shredded carrot, and that will be the raw carrot salad. When are our ideal meal times? I wake up, go to sleep so late, need to work on that. Yeah, so part of your circadian rhythm is going to be the times that you're eating and the times that you're waking up. I recommend having a regular bedtime and a regular wake-up time, and it's a really good idea to do so. You tend to do better hormonally when you wake up at the same time every day or around the same time every day, even on the weekends. When we sleep in till 11 a.m., when we're normally waking up at 7 a.m., our whole day usually feels off. And you probably could admit to me that that's true on those Saturdays where you sleep until 11, watch cartoons in bed till noon, and then you maybe eat something. Your whole day just feels weird and off. And that's why your body likes patterns and routine. And so I usually recommend, even if you want to go back to bed, wake up around the same time, eat some breakfast, and then go snooze if you want. Go Netflix for an hour or two. But just make sure to keep a pretty regular rhythm. If there's no ideal time, it is kind of best to wake up around the time that your body naturally wants to wake up. I know we don't all have that luxury, so it's kind of one of those things where choose a wake up time that works for you and kind of stick with it. But there's no ideal times for eating. You kind of have to fit that into your life. There's no rules around meal times. It's just more about what works for you. Hi Jess, I've been tracking my waking temps and definitely noticed a spike in temp when I ovulate, but my cervical mucus is pretty much non-existent. Trying to conceive in the near future. What would cause this? Thanks. Not everyone has crazy amounts of cervical mucus that's spilling over, but if you have zero or very little, a lot of times it actually is a hydration issue. So there are two big things that play a role in cervical mucus. That's going to be protein, and that's going to be hydration. And not just hydration in the fact you need to drink more water, but more hydration in the sense of I need mineral-rich hydrating foods, things like coconut water and juices, things that have sodium and potassium and magnesium and calcium in them. We need actual nutrient-rich drinks and hydration. And then on top of that, we also would want to consider protein. So are you eating enough protein first and foremost? If you are you digesting it well? If neither of those things are true, those are things you would want to look to as well. Am I digesting my protein well? But those are usually the two first things that I focus on. And then, of course, grass-fed beef liver and B vitamins, those types of fertility-boosting nutrients. What is your recommendation for how to use digestive bitters? If you get the liquid form, usually just taking a shot before meals. If you have a spray form, I know sometimes they come in a spray, you just spray them in the back of the tongue before meals. But yeah, just really right before a meal, it'll stimulate stomach acid. You don't want to take it too far in advance or you'll get the heartburn of death, I like to call it, from hydrochloric acid. How would red light help orange hands from slow thyroid? Any other recommendations to help? So red light, we need vitamin A and red light in order to turn cholesterol into our sex hormones. But we also need red light to stimulate proper thyroid function. And so thyroid health is essential and is usually tied to those orange hands. So if we're getting lots of if we're getting orange hands from our vitamin A rich foods or beta carotene rich foods like carrots, then it's most likely we're having a conversion issue. We're not utilizing the vitamin A well, and it's usually a slow metabolism. So if it's from the raw carrot salad that you're doing every day, my recommendation would be to rinse the raw carrot. Like once you shred the raw carrot, rinsing it off, rinsing a lot of that beta carotene off can help. You're just trying to limit the amount of beta carotene you're getting until you can convert it well. But red light does stimulate thyroid function and lower stress hormones, and so that can, of course, help with your conversion of beta carotene into vitamin A. I keep hearing to eat fruit on an empty stomach. Thoughts, they say it helps digestion. Yeah, I guess the mentality is like the very like food pairing type mentality where fruit digests very quickly, and so therefore if you eat fruit with other things, it's gonna rot and ferment or whatever, I guess. But that's weird. Like if fruit's rotting and fermenting inside of you, you've got bigger issues. You got some gut issues going on. So we should be able to eat foods together. What are your thoughts on soaked and or sprouted grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, etc.? Soaking and sprouting nuts and seeds doesn't change the fact that they're phytoestrogenic. I mean, all those foods that you listed are phytoestrogenic, but I find that nuts and seeds tend to be the most irritating, but I think that sprouting them and soaking them does make them a lot more easily digested. And if I was going to consume those foods, I would sprout and soak them for sure. Do they count as protein? No. But they can be a really good high quality source of carbohydrates. Nuts and seeds tend to be a little bit higher in the polyunsaturated fats, and so that's why I'm not as big of a fan of them. They're also very just metabolically suppressive, so I find that when women consume too much of them, they tend to gain weight, and so it's very easy to overeat nuts and seeds. But for grains, beans, and legumes like lentils, I actually like them for carbohydrates for people that tolerate them well. I think that they can work pretty well for a lot of people, specifically rice, just because it's so easy to digest. Keep seeing content on Insta saying to cut all dairy and all gluten. It sometimes makes me feel stressed. Anytime somebody says that, I unfollow them immediately. They obviously don't understand. I understand the mentality behind it. I used to be someone that was very anti-gluten, anti-dairy. I had all my clients cut gluten and dairy. And over time, I realized that's just kind of too blanket of info, and it doesn't really address the root of the problem. If you're cutting gluten and you're exchanging it for just as crappy gluten-free food, it doesn't really matter. It's just as bad. And then when it comes to dairy, I started looking at the alternatives people were replacing dairy with, and that was the problem. It's like, what are we doing? What are we replacing dairy with? We're replacing it with these nut juices. I call them nut juices because you can't really call nuts blended with water with a bunch of synthetic ingredients added to it, like synthetic vitamins and gums. You can't really call that milk. That's like nut juice. You know what I mean? That's so gross. So it's just like that. Your body doesn't want to eat that anyways. We've convinced ourselves it's an alternative to milk, but it's not. It's not. It's not the same thing. So I don't like those things. I think that a lot of people will get results from cutting gluten and dairy until they don't. They will see immediate results for a while, and then they start to see other things unravel in their health because they're not actually dealing with the root of the issue. What are your thoughts on 5G rolling out? Don't remind me. I don't really, for me, it's kind of one of those things where it is totally beyond our control, but I am very uncomfortable with it. Whenever the commercial comes on, it's like 5G available on every corner. I'm just like, why is that a good thing? What the heck? But yeah, I don't feel very comfortable with it, but on the other hand, I feel like it's kind of one of those things that I'm powerless against, which is so unfortunate because it does seem like it's quite dangerous. At what point would you recommend someone give in to trying a progesterone cream? I think at the point where you're doing all the right things. So you're nourishing your body every single day. You're eating plenty of protein, carb, and fat. You're getting enough light. You're sleeping. All those things, and you're still not seeing a benefit. I don't think there's any problem with experimenting with things. Just being self-aware and kind of paying attention to your body is important. You want to be able to know. If the progesterone is working for you or not. A lot of people will implement it and then they'll just kind of be like, oh, it didn't really work for me at all. And then some people, what they're really experiencing is, estrogen moving. So I think once you've tried and exhausted all your options, it's worth a go. When eating fruit with a meal, should you eat fruit first? Personally, I don't really think so. I personally like it. It kind of when you crave something really sweet, I personally will crave something fresh and sweet after I eat something like a potato. I think that's my body really loving the whole fruit and starch thing. But personally, I like to do it with a meal or after a meal. It tends to satiate me more for whatever reason. If I eat fruit before a meal, I tend to be just ravenously hungry, and my food doesn't satisfy me as well. How long does the magnesium bicarbonate last in the refrigerator, the homemade one you posted? I would say probably a month. I don't want to put an expiration on it because I don't know, but I've probably left mine in the refrigerator for a month at least. Do you eat the skins on sweet potatoes, butternut squashes, other squashes? Nay. They're very protective against bugs and things like that, which means they're probably slightly antibacterial, plus they're hard to digest, so I get rid of those guys. Ellie has been a part of FN since July, which is so amazing. She was one of my first supporters. You've seen so much healing, still never thirsty, and besides a glass or two of juice, sometimes I get to dinner and realize I've had no water. What can I help my cells utilize water? If you've, remember it's winter time right now, so that's not necessarily abnormal. You do tend to... A healthy body that has healthy thyroid function usually will evaporate about 1 liter of water from the skin. But on the other hand, if you have had a lot of healing to do, you do enough sodium and potassium, you get enough magnesium, you're getting enough minerals, and you feel overall very well, that's not something I would stress about. The only time I would stress about that is if I wasn't thirsty and I was peeing a lot, so lots of adrenaline response. If you're peeing more than 5 or 6 times a day, there's usually a problem if you're peeing and you're not drinking water, right? You're shedding something. And then the second thing is I would worry if it was the middle of summer, I went on a really hot walk, I'm sweating a lot, and I'm not thirsty. That's where you really worry. But it's wintertime, it's cold, you're doing juice, you're probably doing a lot of water-rich foods, if you're consuming potatoes and root vegetables. Meats have a little bit of water in them. Fruit has water in them. So don't underestimate the amount of water you are consuming in your foods, in your fruits and vegetables, and the foods you're consuming. And you might be surprised, I'm actually getting hydration, but trust the fact that your body will tell you when it's thirsty, and you can hydrate then. It'll let you know when you need to hydrate. But it is a time, I don't get thirsty. I just started getting thirsty because in Southern California, yesterday, I literally noticed a night and day difference. A week ago, it was rainy, gloomy, probably drank this much water throughout the whole day. I always drink when I'm thirsty. Yesterday, I went on a hike with Samson, and it was really hot, and today, and I chugged water because I was parched. And so I really was able to make that connection, wow, my body is really thirsty today, and it totally told me when it needed water. So I would trust that the body is gonna let you know, and not worry too much about it. Is A2 milk non-homogenized cow milk? I don't know if the A2 brand is. I'm not really sure if it's non-homogenized or not. I've never personally purchased it. But, sometimes we can't get around it. For example, if you do better on A2 milk and it's homogenized, it's probably better to do that one than a A1, A2 combo that's non-homogenized that wrecks your digestive tract. You know what I mean? Okay, Instagram's giving me 2 minutes, so I might have to end this, and I will go live for another 30 minutes after this, so just join me again if I get cut off. What are your thoughts on alcohol and bloating hormones? I don't like alcohol for hormones, especially if you have active digestive issues or hormonal issues. Alcohol is estrogenic, so it's going to stimulate the growth of bacteria and things like that, but it does make you feel good because it increases dopamine. So that's why people like to do it. But different alcohols are going to affect you differently. Spirits are going to affect you probably differently than wine. And then wine, of course, is going to affect you different than a cider. And a cider is going to affect you differently than a beer. Personally, I've noticed that I've never been a beer drinker in my life, but I went to Hawaii and I was enjoying a beer once an evening. And I actually found that the beer was helping my digestion quite a bit. I was feeling really settled, my stomach was really flat. And so I know that small amounts of alcohol can actually have a gut protective effect, but we can easily go overboard. And I have seen that research. So I think it's just one of those things where I don't recommend a drink every day. I don't recommend people drink too much. And when they're actively healing their hormones, it's usually better if you just omit drinking altogether, except for the celebratory occasion. But I do think that it can also be beneficial in small amounts if you're an overall healthy person. Do you know any cases of veganism causing low stomach acid? I think this happened to me once I started incorporating animal foods due to the flatulence I experienced immediately. Yeah, it causes low stomach acid for everyone. If you're not consuming protein, you don't make stomach acid. Animal protein, I should say. Megan Remedy talks a lot about this on her YouTube channel. All right, guys, I have to leave, but I will go live again. See you in a sec.